The three main jobs in modern media would be video producer, writer reporter, and social curator. And we'll go through these three and like what's the most traditional and what's the least traditional and how you get one of these three jobs and why these three jobs are important. So the most traditional in media is still probably a writer / reporter. And the main way you get these jobs is coming out of journalism school. That's mainly the way most media publishing companies still hire writers and reporters, is that you went to journalism school, preferably at, a highly ranked school. You wrote for that school's paper. Maybe you wrote some compelling Medium articles, and then you get hired on as a junior writer or an intern, and you work your way up. So that would I would say is still the most traditional media route if you want to work in media. The second big media job is something called a video producer, which has changed, I think, from what a lot of schools teach. So universities, when they use the term producer, you take film schools, a lot of times you'll take a class in editing, but that's about it. There'll be a lot of film theory, maybe a structural class. But in modern media, a video producer kind of does it all. A video producer is expected to know how to write a little bit, how to script, how to shoot, and how to edit. Specifically, how to shoot and edit. Those are really important. And if you want to be a video producer in modern news media, you need to know how to both shoot and edit, and shoot on digital cameras. The two main cameras most media companies use are like Canon 5Ds or 80Ds and then Sony A7s. So the best way to become a video producer is to associate yourself with those two types of cameras and to learn how to edit, even if you're not getting taught that in school. And almost without a doubt, every media company uses Adobe Premiere and the Adobe Creative Suite. So it's really useful to know how to edit on Adobe Premiere. So your basic video producer is going to know how to shoot on a DSLR and edit on Adobe Premiere. And on top of that, you can have, layers of producers. Some producers will be a bit better with shooting. Some producers be a bit better with editing. A really good producer will also know how to do After Effects, but it's not a requirement. There's probably an offshoot of producer called animator. They blur together a little bit, and that animators are also expected to know how to edit in Premiere. But they mainly will focus on After Effects, whereas most producers, it's not necessary that you know how to do After Effects. But if you are good with After Effects, that'll definitely boost how you're viewed in the job market and probably how much money you're able to make. The third important media job, position, career is something called a social curator. And this is a relatively new job. They probably don't teach it or talk about it in colleges. And a social curator's job is simply to take, as I talked about in a previous video, all the content that's being made and produced at a media organization and figure out how to optimize it for all the various platforms. Because most media companies now no longer depend on their native platform alone. So like the New York Times, the New York Times used to just put their content on the New York Times website or on their paper. But nowadays, most media companies rely on a variety of distribution platforms. The main three, I would say, being Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, with Instagram coming up on a very close fourth. So social curators take whatever videos or articles are being written by the writers and the video producers and package, that's what they call it, it's an industry term, package that content and put it out on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube with a thumbnail or a headline or description tailored to what they think will do best on Twitter or YouTube or Facebook. And the way you become a social curator, there's not really, you can't really go to school for something like that. It mainly, from working in the media industry, most social curators were originally writers or reporters. And from writing and reporting, they then transitioned into a social curation role. Not many video producers become social curators. I don't know very many social curators that know how to edit, for instance. So most social curators will come from an editorial writing reporting background, not from a video production background. Now, in terms of like how much money, each of these three main media jobs make, a starting reporter is probably going to make around 40 to 50. A starting video producer is probably going to make around 50, maybe a little more. And a social curator may make a little bit higher amount of money, maybe 50 to 60. That's mainly only because nobody's really just hired straight out of the gate as a social curator. You've usually been a writer or a reporter at a media company before, and so therefore have some work experience on your resume and can negotiate a little higher pay. But that's about going to be your pay range. So let's say like a starting writer at Vice or Vox is $45,000. A starting video producer role is $50,000. And if you just become like an average social curator, is probably making $55,000, $60,000 to start. So if you're thinking these people are well paid, they're not. Most people at digital media companies are not that well paid. That's probably their average salary. And something I want to say is that like a lot of times writers and reporters, because they're the most like traditional in background, they don't know how to edit or shoot anything at all. And so a lot of times reporters and video producers will work together in media companies. And the person you see on camera often isn't the video producer. It's often the reporter or the writer, sometimes referred to as talent. A lot of times it's the reporters and the writers. They get moved up onto the camera and onto talent. It's not the video producers. So if you really want to be on camera, your best bet is to actually become a writer first or a reporter and not pursue a video career position. You're less likely to be on camera in the future that way. There's also, I think, a kind of a dividing line, especially in New York media world, where reporters or writers are seen a little more seriously than video producers are. One, because they're on camera, and two, it's still an old school way of thinking that like writers are, have editorial authority, and video producers are just, help. But a really good way, especially in New York, of judging, who has authority and seniority in companies and who's taken seriously and not, is to look at Twitter. Twitter is kind of the pecking order, the hierarchical graph of all New York City media. And video producers and journalists take Twitter very seriously. So you can pretty well judge, how serious somebody's taken in various company by what their Twitter following is and whether they're verified or not. So a really good way of finding out, like, well, how serious is this player? Go look at their Twitter. Speaking of Twitter, because Twitter is so highly valued in media companies, if you have a big Twitter presence, that'll go a long way in getting you a job if you're trying to break into the industry. So I would recommend, really maximizing your Twitter, probably more so than Facebook or YouTube, especially if you want to be a writer and a reporter. If you want to be a video producer, Twitter's probably less important. There's a lot of very great video producers behind Vice and Vox that you'd never know. They have no Twitter presence, like 80 followers, and just their bios is, head producer at, Vox, or senior producer at Bustle, or Mashable, or Attention. So there's that. But something that's different with video producing is that I think a lot of people still come from it, especially if they've gone to school for film, they come thinking that in the media world it's going to be kind of a collaborative effort, and that's changed quite a bit. And that most video producers, like modern day video producers in news media, the media world, are expected to kind of carry projects all the way through. And so it's not going to be like, there's not going to be an editor, a writer, a voiceover person, somebody who oversees a script, a videographer. If you're a video producer, you're going to be expected to do it all and understand how to carry through a video from ideation to execution. And you'll basically come up with the idea or be told the idea from the head of video, whoever your boss is, and be expected to edit, shoot, and make that video a reality. At which point you'll then hand it off to the social curators in the company, and they'll package it. And that's where you get into, as I spoke to earlier in other videos, where often the headlines and descriptions and photos that you see on like a YouTube video or a tweet from a media company don't actually have that much correlation to the content that's behind it, and that's because they're done by totally different people. And oftentimes, the social curator didn't have anything to do with making the actual content. They were just handed a final product, and now they're just trying to maximize the clicks on it. And so they might be a little more unscrupulous in the way they market it. That being said, social curators, I think, are probably the job that's most likely to go away too in media, and that the back end of most media companies have a pretty big software development team, and they're all the time figuring out algorithms to optimize content for various distributed platforms like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And so now, some media companies, they're starting to implement software that will just auto do it for you. You just plug in, you'll finish a product, whether you're a writer and you finished a piece, or a video producer and finished a video. You'll plug it into a software on the back end with a couple of thumbnail options or a couple of title options, and that algorithm will publish it and A/B test it, figure out who's clicking the most, and then just run it with that headline. So social curator may be a job that might disappear here in 5 to 10 years. But those are the main 3 jobs in modern news media: writer, reporter, video producer, and social curator. And if you really want to be on screen or become a talent, you want to kind of be a writer, reporter. And if you want to make videos, your best bet to get hired isn't so much going through school like it would be a writer reporter, but to just make a lot of work and kind of put it out there, whether it's on Vimeo accounts or YouTube accounts, and to kind of build up a portfolio. Twitter's less important. Twitter's important for if you want to be a writer reporter, or maybe a social curator, but it's not so important if you want to be a video producer. Anyway, that's just some behind the scenes stuff for getting a job in news media. Just a thought. Have a good night, you guys.